Welcome to another edition of Anglican Unscripted. This is episode 897. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
I'm George Conger. Today is January 14th, 2024.
Welcome to another episode of Anglican Unscripted. We are so glad you could be here. Listen, this is the only denomination that produces news 24 hours a day. If you're an Anglican, you know that there's just a lot of stuff that goes on all the time. We just recently had the resignation of Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, after a certain report came out that said he did not do it right. And we'll be talking about that, and we'll be talking about kind of the reaction now to his resignation. But before we get there, I want you to know that I'm in Maryland for a little while, up here in Solomon, Maryland. It's the southern tip, about an hour southeast of D.C., and it is currently 18 degrees. And 18 degrees means it's cold enough in Fahrenheit to snow. And last week we had 13 inches of snow on top of Sasquatch. Sasquatch, my RV, did just fine. Doing fine. I'm wearing a turtleneck today because it's so cold out, George. What did I leave behind in Florida? How is it down there?
We are at the tip of the cold front that's hit the northeast, so that in the early mornings it'll be in the low 40s, but it'll get to the mid 60s, and today it should get to 70. And so it's for us Floridians, this is subarctic weather. And then you see these tourists on the golf course in shorts, pants, and short sleeve shirts playing golf, whereas the caddies are wearing down jackets. So it's quite interesting. Well, we're in the few weeks of winter we get in Florida.
A lot of people tease Floridians that you have Florida blood. You can't handle the cold at all. And I'll tell you what, after spending an hour and a half scraping 13 inches of snow off my RV, I was reacclimated to winter weather, George. I came back in, it was nice and warm, and I could go outside again without having that blast of cold. It's possible to reacclimate a Floridian to the cold. I'm sorry we had to lay that on our audience, but you need to know the truth. We're very transparent about what goes on here in the life of two co-host of Anglican Unscripted. Let's bring up the news here. As I alluded to before, we're going to talk about the Welby postmortems. There's been many articles on Welby's tenure, and they generally describe it as a failure. George and I are not surprised. Early on, we kind of gathered that this was not going to be the Archbishop we had hoped for. First of all, he has failed at a parish level, George.
Yeah, there are not much new news about Justin Welby, but everybody and their uncle are writing obituaries for the man. And almost all of them are harsh. There are a few that say, well, he did his best in a difficult situation. But if you read the newspapers in England, the United States, Canada, Australia, they all sound the same theme, that Justin Welby was a failure in his position. And it was a failure on multiple levels. On the parish level, it was a failure. I mean, this is an archbishop who sparked the Save the Parish movement. Who are they saving the parish from? The archbishop. From the COVID lockdowns, where the churches were closed, and in some cases unreasonably so that even the rector or the vicar or the incumbent couldn't go in to celebrate prayers, to the massive bureaucratization of the church, the paperworks, the forms, and the parish priest is under tremendous pressure. His stipend has not kept rise with the cost of living. His housing situation is getting worse and worse. And over this, Justin Welby presided. It fell on an organization.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It was an organizational failure, too, of the organization of the Church of England. There has been a push to bring into office bishops who are middle managers. Justin Welby, they're not so much clones of Justin Welby, but he is the symbol par excellence. Inoffensive pencil pushers, people who have had experience in other fields of management before they come into the church. So you have bishops now with only 6, 7, 8 years experience, hardly any in the parish, going straight into senior levels of ministry management. Well, what we've seen is that's been a tremendous failure. The organizational structures of the church are now unwieldy, unworkable. Too much money is being thrown into drone positions from DEI officers, ecumenical officers, women officers, gay and lesbian officers, net zero officers. So that we now have the situation in the Diocese of Truro, which is Cornwall, where there are, I think, 31 stipendiary priests and 27 church diocesan staffers.
Mm-hmm. Well, he also failed on he failed at an international level as well. It's not just in Canterbury.
In other words, nobody disliked George Carey. They may not have cared for him in some aspects, but he was respected. Rowan Williams was respected, and up to a point when he failed to act upon the recommendations of the primates following the Dar es Salaam meeting. At that point, the Nigerians washed their hands of the whole show because they had been promised that Justin Welby, Rowan Williams would fly to New Orleans to the Episcopal General Convention, lay down the law. Well, he flew to New Orleans. He didn't lay down the law. That began the unraveling, but still Rowan Williams could call a primates meeting and the primates would come. Justin Welby had a great deal of initial enthusiasm because this is a Holy Trinity Brompton. This is an alpha archbishop. And he started off with all this excitement and it just went south very quickly. So that there arose a level of personal animosity between a number of primates and Justin Welby. And in fact, the last few years have been working, there have been leaders of the Global South working very hard to remove the Archbishop of Canterbury from the titular position of first among equals. So as a failure, the Lambeth Conference as a symbol of unity was a failure under Welby. The Anglican Communion is shattered, and Welby only made it worse.
Well, I think he also, but it's true. I think he also failed to lead spiritually. I mean, we even asked ChatGTP, what is the role of a bishop? And the role of a bishop, according to ChatGTP, was to guide and guard the church. And he couldn't do that. He was unable to guide it, and he certainly did not guard the faith of the church.
Yeah, and compared to his predecessors, the ones I knew well, George Carey adopted a position of basically being the nation's vicar. And so he would offer pastoral advice and pastoral care, but it was received as such. Rowan Williams was a theologian, and his mind was greatly respected, and Williams could hold two different thoughts in his head and try to seek the way forward. Welby did not have an aura of holiness about him. He did not have a sense of spiritual gravitas or authority. I'm not saying that he wasn't a great theologian. I'm saying he wasn't a theologian and he wasn't a pastor. He wasn't somebody whose life and work evidenced a relationship with Jesus Christ such that it would lead other people to Christ. I don't know what's in his soul. Maybe this is a class issue. Maybe this is a function of his background in education. But there really was, we've got articles saying that the Church of England needs to get rid of its class system. Well, friends, the class system's been there for how many hundreds of years? But Justin Welby's behavior exacerbated the anger over this issue. There was and just from the little things of being a little petty tyrant at times, snapping at subordinates.
Little anger issues. He was not bishops should not be quick to anger. He was sometimes quick to anger, so.
And when I'm saying anger, it's like, he's got a deacon who's flipping the pages of the prayer book for him while he's at the altar, and they mess up and move to the wrong place. Welby would chastise the deacon, at an appropriate point in front of everybody else, not just let it go with the flow. I mean, well, in other words, when you're celebrating the sacraments, your heart should be focused on the power, the presence of the risen Lord Jesus Christ, not on the outer sensibilities of, she turned to the wrong page. Where's your mind? When your mind is on looking good rather than being present with Christ, to me, that's a lack of holiness.
Concentrating on the performance and not the spirit, that's not a good look. But now we have called, especially from the Guardian, hey, we need a different type of archbishop. Maybe, perhaps, we get a woman. That would solve all our problems.
Yeah. Well, they're thinking that if a woman was in charge, we wouldn't have had all these legal fiascos. Welby was a legal failure. But then all we need to do is point to the Bishop of London, Sarah Mullally, whose failures in the legal area have led to the suicide of a gay priest. Then there's Welby and the House of Bishops and the bishops in the House of Lords. People have, the bishops are in the House of Lords because they add moral grounding and authority to the deliberations of government.
Not so much.
That may be the ideal.
Yes.
Well, the reality is they started in the House of Lords because they were great landowners like the dukes and barons and earls. They had a rightful position because they were powerful and wealthy. Then it morphed into being spiritual voices. But under Justin Welby, the bishops in the House of Lords have voted in lockstep, like supporting conservative government plans to ship migrants, illegal aliens to Rwanda for processing, that if you don't oppose that, you're not a good Christian. I mean, it's just pettiness of political making, the things that the bishops took stands on, they just were lockstep with left liberal Guardian readers. So it's a failure on that level too. And now we're at the point where I'm looking at some of the articles that are coming out. People are demanding a Christian archbishop.
Please, what?
Reading, like here's what the Paul wrote in his letter to Titus about a bishop and all this and that. And I hate to put it this way, but when the response to your leaving a job is, well, we need to start all over again and go back to basics, and this is what we want, a faithful, believing, a man and a one wife and all that stuff. When that is the response to your retirement, that we've got to wipe the slate clean and start over again and go back to basics, that is the mark of a failed episcopate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, we still talk about Catherine Jefferts Schori. We still talk about George Carey. We still talk about Roland Williams, Frank Griswold, because we want to draw your attention to things that worked or did not work in the past. We will be talking about Justin Welby on Anglican Unscripted for years, for the reality that we want to hold him as an example of maybe some places we don't want to go in the future. That there should be a different type of leadership if you want to have somebody who is going to lead the Anglican Communion. Now, we have a story coming up in a minute where we'll talk about what should in the Global South and GAFCON do in the future here. But, this is tough stuff to report about because we had high hopes, certainly for the new Archbishop when he was new just almost 10 years ago. Let's talk about Mother Nature, George, and we'll talk about natural disasters. We're going to talk about the California wildfires.
That has dominated the news in the United States.
Yeah.
I think it also in international coverage, it's been pretty strong.
Sure.
And so I think you have to be under a rock to not know what we're speaking of.
Yeah.
The wildfires that began in the Pacific Palisades of northwestern Los Angeles County. And I think there were 4 or 5 fires. I think at this point, over 10,000 homes have been burned. At least 24 people are dead and 14 are missing. We're not so much going to go into the details of the fire, but one of the things that, some of the details are, like St. Mark's Episcopal Church and all day school next door burned to the ground. We don't know what's happened to the church in Pacific Palisades and Malibu. Mm-hmm. Some C4SO parishes have had to pull out of their accommodations because of fire and damage. And I don't know if any Diocese of the West parishes have been hurt, but basically everybody in that area from Malibu east up to Pasadena and down to Santa Monica is either destroyed or severely damaged, or there are people displaced from their homes. It's a really bad situation.
It is. I mean, the latest report today was 12,000 structures have been leveled. If 12,000 structures have been leveled, many churches would have gone with them, of course. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And the thing is that there's a great deal of misinformation out there. Misinformation, in fact, downright lies. So that we're starting to see the 2 movies on one screen where some people see this and understand it to mean that. Other people see the same thing and think it means something different. So like Adam Schiff, who's now the senator from California, or will be in a week or so, is saying, oh, no, that reservoir outside of the Palisades, that was filled with water. It wasn't empty. Well, we have the water department saying, yeah, it was empty. It's been under maintenance for a while.
And they showed the video. They don't just say they show the video.
Governor Newsom saying, I'm fighting disinformation. We did not favor the snail darter or the smelt or salmon over people. And then Fox News will run a video saying, I'm so proud to announce we've taken down 4 dams in the Klamath River so that the salmon can swim upstream so American Indians can be happy. And we haven't built the reservoirs that we took out a $7.5 billion bond issue to build. So the thing is, a lot of this stuff, I don't know what to believe. I mean, is Gavin Newsom right? Are his critics right? But I think the thing that I'm taking away from this is there's a profound spiritual and cultural and moral shift taking place, especially in Southern California. Well, now Franklin Graham was on the internet. I'm sorry.
Well, I was going to say, you and I had this discussion pre-show. Is this a natural disaster? And I would say from what we know so far, this is a self-inflicted disaster. No water in the fire hydrants, no brush control on the mountains, no ability to foresee this is going to happen once every 4 years when the Santa Ana winds come off the top of the mountains and blow west at 70, 80, 90 miles an hour. To me, this is not a natural disaster. This is Kevin finally supporting human climate change. This is a bunch of idiots who have a history of this happening over the last 6-7 decades and not preparing for the next time it's going to happen. Guess what? This is the next time. It's no longer a natural disaster. This is a self-inflicted human disaster, and I don't know what it takes for humans to understand we need to now prepare. Okay, you lost 12,000 structures. Prepare so we don't do it again in 5 years. What do you need to? What needs to go on up here so you don't do that?
Well, Victor Davis Hanson, who is a commentator, is a professor up at the Hoover Institution at Stanford. You'll see him on TV from time to time. He had really good point about this. He's called this a DEI disaster. Mm-hmm. He said, now, we're not talking about individuals. You cannot say that because the mayor of Los Angeles or the fire chief and the top 3 personnel at the fire department were lesbians, that is not what it is. A DEI problem is a systematic issue, a systems issue, where instead of favoring competence, you favor something else. So that what is important is not that the job is done, but the right people are in the job. Now, this is the problem in South America, where you don't hire the best man for the job, you hire your cousin, and you give the cousin the job. And so that there is a government failure across the board. Los Angeles Fire Department fired all these firefighters. They call them fire persons right now. It's really getting weird. I can't keep track of the woke language. They fired fire persons because they refused COVID shots. And so their staffing is way down, and they replaced them. 70% of the people they hired in to replace them had to be from minority or ethnic backgrounds. So we had the chief of diversity at the fire department, the number 3 person, saying, it doesn't matter if I can't carry a man out of a burning building. It's his fault for being in there in the first place. Well, I have to tell you, I don't really care if the firefighter looks like me when they're rescuing me. I would just want to be rescued.
Well, hold on. I saw the interview with this lady, large, lesbian. She could have carried me out. She looked beefy. I don't know what she was complaining about.
Maybe not me, but maybe she could carry you. You've lost all this weight, Kevin. You're now lithe and slim from your bike riding. But we're not talking about this woman so much. We're talking about a system that did not make competency and efficiency the best mark, so that we have reservoirs empty. We have hydrants not fully connected. They needed hydrants, so we got all the hydrants. Oh, so we can count having the hydrants. Oh, well, we didn't run the pipes to the hydrants yet. That's competency. And this is sparking a questioning of life in Southern California. Franklin Graham was on the social media saying, no, God is not punishing the people of Los Angeles for their wickedness, because there's some fundamentalist types who say, this is God's plan to scourge the evildoers in LA. Well, Franklin Graham's point was that in these disasters, whether they're natural or man-made, the just and the unjust alike suffer. And so you cannot say that this is God's direct punishment. But people are starting to ask the questions, is this how we should live? Is this what is important to us? Is this what matters? Anthony Hopkins, the actor, Silence of the Lambs, whatnot. I'm a Facebook friend, me and 500,000 other people.
Yes, right.
He's a prolific poster on social media, Facebook, Instagram. Mm-hmm. And Hopkins had a beautiful home in that area, Palisades, overlooking the ocean and the mountains. And he had, in the past, he loved his house. He had one of these giant California houses where you come in and it's just like a giant hangar with the kitchen, living room, dining rooms, all going out to opening a balcony that overlooks the sea. And he would have videos of him playing the piano with friends around him, and he liked to cook and everything. Really fun, entertaining guy to watch. Well, all that was destroyed. And Hopkins, who had become a Christian in midlife after dealing with alcoholism, wrote a post on Facebook saying that, what is important in life is not the material things. What is important in life is how you live your life and whom you love. And he was giving a Christian message, which is that, here he is at the top peak of affluence among the 1%ers, if you will, in Los Angeles. And yes, he's lost everything, but he's got a relationship based on love with Jesus Christ and the people around him. Mm-hmm. And he still has it. And he has not lost a thing that matters. Now,
well, we had the same for Mel Gibson. Mel Gibson said, who was doing an interview on the Joe Rogan podcast while his house was burning, said it's just stuff, and I won't have to fix that stupid leak under the sink anymore. And so that's the right perspective, that it's just stuff. And now I think they can self-examine themselves, because this tragedy happened in mass. Your friends, your family, your neighbors, all around you lost their houses. As of today, 12,000 of you have lost a structure. And in as such, it's a shared devastation.
I have a Facebook friend who comes to this. He lives in Pacific Palisades, and he comes here to this parish 2 or 3 times a year because his mother lives here, and he'll come and visit her, and we get on. He's a partnered gay man. We enjoy each other's company at coffee hour.
Sure.
And I sent him a Facebook message as these fires were going on, and he'd lost everything. His house is gone. And his response was, the anger that he feels isn't so much yes, the first punch, the first bullet in the heart was losing his home. The second bullet in his head was all states canceling his insurance earlier this year.
Mm-hmm.
So that he has no recourse to insurance to rebuild. So he would have to rebuild out of his personal savings, but then he's thinking that to rebuild is going to take 10 years because there are only so many contractors. Government red tape is so horrendous. And they may decide that now is the time to say no more building on the side of these mountains that fall down during the mudslides. In other words, for his word was he felt like he had been raped by this disaster. And this was such a smack in the head. It was causing him to think about, what is life about? What is really important? What is this and that? This is just one anecdote.
Sure.
But my sense is that this sense of rape, not only the natural or government disaster, but the second true government disaster, because the California legislature said to the insurance companies, you may not raise your rates to cover your potential losses. You can only write insurance if it will cause you to have a loss. So the insurance company said, fine.
Bye. Yeah.
We're out. We're not in business to lose money. And that was entirely the California legislature's doing. And so now, what is his recourse, this fellow's recourse? He's, man in his 50s, late 50s, early 60s. His major asset was his home. I'm sure he has intangible worth in his law firm. The point is, he's got to start over. And it's going to take the rest of his life to come back to where he might have been materially. And so his heart is moving in spiritual directions.
Well, the city of LA has to start over as well. All of these houses paid a higher income property tax because there was a house on the property. Basically, I watched an interview with the tax guy from LA. He says, if you own a property in LA with a house on it, we count the house as 1/3 of the value of your property. So right away, of those 12,000 structures, the total that the LA is losing in income from property tax is 1/3 of all that. 2/3 you're still responsible for. So even if your house is lying in ashes and lying in dust and all you see is your basement, you still owe us that bottom 2/3, the land value, they call it. And so, but if all of a sudden LA has lost that budget income for that 1/3, they have to refigure their priorities. Well, we cut $48 million from the fire department, but that is not going to be enough next year where we have less income. LA starts over again, Let's have more DEI,
And this is unfortunate, but there's already complaints because the Biden administration is treating this disaster differently than the disaster in Western North Carolina. The Biden administration is promising more money faster response times to the devastation in the Palisades, while there's still people in the hills of western North Carolina that are living in tents and winter is here because the government is so incompetent and so slow and is being so persnickety about temporary housing being built, it has to be to code and all this and that. So there's a rising political storm as some conservatives, because Western North Carolina is a conservative part of the country, feel like they're treated differently than a liberal part of the country that backed President Biden.
Mm-hmm. Well, we'll have to see. I just know there's not a lot of Amish in California. There's plenty of Amish over here on the East Coast, and they were delivering.
A little too hot for those beards and those straw hats.
Yeah, straw hats. In fact, right here in Maryland, we have a large Amish community. When we drive to church, they are on the same street as us in their buggies going to their church. And it's cute because I'm not going to pass. No, we'll drive buggy speeds today, Jill. But it's wonderful.
You're shouting, "Get thou out of the way!"
Get thou out of the way. But in honesty, the Amish provided many RV trailers to North Carolina and other hit spots this last month, despite what FEMA said and what the government said. They just delivered them, they plugged them in, they hooked them up to sewer and water, and said, hey, if the government wants to haul them out of here, let the government haul them out of here. So we shall see. But, thank God for the Amish.
To me, my favorite story, and again, I don't know if this is misinformation. Sure. I saw it on one of the networks, where fire trucks from Oregon came down to fight the fire, but they first had to stop in Sacramento to make sure that their emissions standards met California standards, because emission standards for diesel vehicles are different in Oregon than in California. And so they were held up in Sacramento for several days while their engines were tuned to meet California emission standards for diesel fumes. I
don't know how true that one is, but I do know when they got to Malibu and that area, there was no fuel. All the power was off. So their trucks
But again, here's the thing. I have no clue whether that's true or false. I just saw it on TV, and that is no longer a guarantor of accuracy.
All right, let's go back to England. There's a new guy in charge. He's not officially the Archbishop of Canterbury, but he's going to fulfill the roles, and that's the Archbishop of York. And he started off this new job by sending out a letter, and his letter says, let me see, the Epiphany letter to clergy says, we might have to change you from the title of clergy or office holders to employees. I'm sure that would apply to bishops as well. George, what's the story?
This is deeply disingenuous on the part of the Archbishop of York, in my opinion. Mm-hmm. I don't know what's in man's heart. Maybe it's exactly what he says. We need to make clergy employees so we can discipline them and fire them more easily if they do bad stuff. Well, that's not the problem. Bishops can already discipline clergy, and they can do all these things to get, under the current system where a clergy person has an office. Now, people may ask, George, how can you be so nasty to Catherine Jefferts Schori and make fun of all these Episcopalians and just be so negative about the Episcopal Church and not worry about your job? Because I'm an office holder, not an employee. The only thing that can get me, I will never get a promotion, okay? I will never go higher or farther. But I can't be gotten rid of short of criminal conduct because I have tenure of office. I am safe here till I'm 75. Church of England, if you make them employees, well, I don't like your face. You're an at-will employee. You can be fired for any reason to no reason. Mm-hmm. Now, so that means, what does that mean? That means that bishops can get rid of troublesome clergy, whether they are conservative evangelicals who don't want to give money to the diocese anymore, or they're liberal activists who are complaining that you're not acting quickly and sufficiently on the child abuse scandals.
You don't say the LLF prayers in your church? Yeah.
This is a power grab by the bishops by the blob, because who's going to fire a bishop? Well, we'd be employees too. Well, yeah. Well, who would you report to? The archbishop. Yeah, that's really going to. Yeah, that's really fair. So this Epiphany letter, which had many parts about it, that we are facing a safeguarding crisis, this and that. Cottrell is trying to wiggle and maneuver and get himself out of the crosshairs that are calling for him to go. And so he's throwing this bone of making him clergy employees so you can get rid of him more easily. But he's not addressing the problem, which isn't the clergy, the priests, it's the bishops.
Okay, well, let's back up here. The Church of England does not have a safeguarding issue. They have an accountability issue. They have good, sound safeguarding laws as of 2024. What they do not have is the ability to hold bishops and some clergy accountable. And they certainly do not have the ability to go back in time, unless you're a Bishop Bell from some dead bishop, to hold you accountable. And they can only hold accountable the dead. Well, that's God's job, not the archbishop. So we shall see what happens there. I do wish the Archbishop of York well in his temporal role, but we shall see and talk more about that in the future. Hey, saw a great funeral on TV. We laid to rest the 100-year-old former President Jimmy Carter, who served right before Ronald Reagan, right after Gerald Ford. And for pomp and circumstance and the beauty of what the Episcopal Church can perform, not bad, George.
Oh, yeah. We do so well at faking it, okay? If all you knew about the Episcopal Church is what you saw on TV, oh, man, we are the cream of the crop, the best. Presiding Bishop Sean Rowe was wonderful at this funeral. The dean at the cathedral was fantastic. Beautiful choir, beautiful music, beautiful buildings. Makes you proud to be an American. Makes you proud, to be an Episcopalian. But then somebody worked in Imagine by John Lennon, I think.
Oh, no, stop. They didn't work it in. That is the gospel of the Episcopal Church. John Lennon's gospel is
No.
I know it is.
You got. It may be the gospel of the Episcopal Church, but you got to give them some artistic credit. That had to be a family request, because music director at a cathedral would work John Lennon in unless it's a direct family request.
Imagine there's no heaven. It's easy if you try. Oh, I love that. Oh, it's so Episcopal. So,
well,
or let it be.
It was a pretty show. We do those shows well. It was Episcopal Church at its best. But I want to blame the Carter family for Imagine.
Well, I did enjoy watching it too, and but two people breaking out guitar and singing Imagine was just a little weird for me. But I have seen weirder in an Episcopal service than that would ever be. Let's talk about the UK press. The Times, the Telegraph, the Daily Mail have finally picked up the oldest story in Anglicanism in the century, anyway. And have started to talk about maybe we should have some changes in the Anglican Communion structures. Really? Now? I may be too late, but it's starting to make the press that there is trouble within how Anglicanism works. Perhaps the 5, 10, 15 measures of unity just don't work. So let's talk a little bit about this, George. This is what Anglican Unscripted was made for.
Well, as Kevin mentioned, Times, Daily Mail, Telegraph all had stories this past week about plans to move the Archbishop of Canterbury out of the center of the Anglican world. This is an old story. There's several. This story began about 8 years ago when Munir Nis, then the primate of Alexandria in Egypt, said that the archbishop, the head of the first among equals, should be elected from among the primates. And this percolated around, and Welby did his best to kill it. He killed it by saying, okay, we'll have the Anglican Consultative Council look at this. They'll issue a study, and the study will report to a meeting in 2026, which will look at it a second time in 2029. And then we might take it to the Lambeth Conference in 2038. By that, I'll be dead, Justin Welby's thinking. Well, things sped up a bit. The paper was released in November by the Inter-Anglican Commission on Unity, Faith, and Order, which we jokingly call the UFO Commission. And there were some Global South representatives on this commission, and a very mild form of rethinking the role of the Archbishop of Canterbury was put forward. Coupled with this, the Global South Fellowship of Anglicans and GAFCON have called and have strengthened their call that the Archbishop of Canterbury not be the de facto leader of the communion, that this person be elected. We have talked about this many, many times, and in fact, we have given advice to the Global South: act now, seize the moment of in the vacuum where Welby is gone. Cottrell has got his hands full with trying to keep the Church of England from knifing him. Now is when you need to act. And somebody somewhere thought, well, let's keep the Welby story alive by basically saying he was so bad that they're now going to redo everything in the international Anglican sphere.
Well, hold on. But even Rowan Williams said the job is too much for one person to be Archbishop of Canterbury and the leader of the Anglican Communion. Rowan said it's too much. So,
well, he said it was too much because the budget wasn't there for him to do anything.
Yeah,
he had to fly to all these places. He needed staff to do all this stuff, and the Church of England wouldn't pay for it because what do they get in return out of it?
Blue tent.
Now, I have to for those who don't have familiarity with the history of the Anglican world, the idea that the Archbishop of Canterbury was among equals is a 20th century invention. It's not something that you find in the 39 Articles or the Book of Common Prayer. In fact, the role of the Archbishop of Canterbury is notably absent. It's a post-World War II phenomena with the centralization of authority found in the United States and the New World Global Order. And the one thing that Britain had following the Second World War was they began to form the Commonwealth, but they also had the Anglican Communion. So now the Commonwealth has taken a life of its own, but the Anglican Communion was that other international thing where Britain's still on top. And one of the residual effects is that, for instance, the Vatican looking around saying, well, let's do international ecumenical talks. Well, we can do it with the people whom the Anglicans say is their top leader. And so that's the only reason why, Justin Welby would go to the Vatican and whatnot is not because of his personal or professional stance, but rather because the Catholics assume that maybe there's an Anglican Pope and he's as close as they get. Well, that's all fallen down right now, so that the Catholics can no longer make the claim that they're in dialogue with the Anglicans if all they do is talk to the Archbishop of Canterbury. In fact, they should be talking to the Nigerians and the Rwandans and the Ugandans and the Sydney-siders. And so I'm not criticizing the newspapers for picking up the story. It's just, I think that they're a little late to the game and they don't realize that this has been a generation in the making.
Oh, easily.
It's not just yes, Justin Welby accelerated this because he had plans to string it out bureaucratically for a decade or two. But his collapse has sped things up. So that's correct.
Well, the collapse of the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, also shows the collapse of the Archbishop of Canterbury, that office, the see and the seat. And it also shows the collapse of the instruments of union. Okay. So we see all this structure collapse. There has to be a solution. There has to be a way forward for the Anglican Communion to have leadership. And so if the current seat is vacated, I would hope the Global South, and we're going to say it again, and GAFCON would gather together and set forth on paper a course for the Anglican Communion. Show us some leadership. Show us that you can fill a vacuum.
The most powerful point of the Archbishop of Canterbury's tenure was at the 1998 Lambeth Conference under George Carey. Mm-hmm. George Carey was the president of the conference, and he sat at the dais, the central table, and he heard both sides, and he moderated the debates and this and that. But then when he finally spoke, he spoke saying, this is what I understand the gospel to mean on homosexuality, that it is not genital homosexuality. Lambeth 110.
Right.
I'm in favor of it.
Mm-hmm.
And then the bishops voted. And people forget that the majority of American Episcopal bishops voted in favor of Lambeth 110.
Including Frank.
I was there, and I was watching because they don't record votes. It's a show of hands. And my bishop at the time, John Howe, one of the conservative leaders, voted. They had all these sort of amendments to sort of weaken it. And seated immediately in front of John Howe was Jay Walker, the Bishop of Long Island, who was involved in a number of gay clergy scandals, was a real liberal, and was allegedly died of HIV/AIDS, so on and so forth. And Howe and Walker voted opposite each of the amendments. Then the final vote came, and Howe and Walker voted together. So that's a pro-gay activist bishop like Jay Walker, when the Archbishop of Canterbury finally called the motion after all the amendments are done, he and a lot of the other pro-gay bishops voted for it because of the authority of the Archbishop of Canterbury. Fast forward to the Lambeth Conference a year or two ago, that's all gone because those against it weren't present, and there were no votes allowed and no opinions taken. It was all basically a graduate seminar where you got to be instructed by your betters. So the apex of that point was George Carey. It began to decline under Ron Williams, but collapsed entirely under Justin Welby.
Well, it did that by not just its inability as the Archbishop of Canterbury, the seat and the person, to guide and guard. They took away the ability of all archbishops to guide and guard, to be leaders of the church, to be spokesmen and presenters of the gospel, to be teachers. You don't have that ability anymore. It's all presided in this little office.
And I know it's considered fashionable to sneer at George Carey, mainly because of his working class backgrounds. There's a huge class snobbery involved with George Carey. But he had more moral authority over the Anglican bishops than an Etonian like Justin Welby ever had. Now, I'm not saying George Carey is a saint. He just turned 90, and he's surrendered his permission to officiate in the Diocese of Oxford, basically because he has been accused, when he was a seminary president of Trinity College in Bristol, and John Smythe was there as a day student, non-degree student, not have done anything about Smythe at the time. He doesn't remember Smythe. But Carey said, I think discretion is the better part of valor. I'm 90 years old. I will surrender my license to officiate.
Wait, so he did
not
this
a
humbly.
perfect man.
He's not fighting it. He's humble about this. That's nice.
He's humble about us. And, there's some things that you just have to accept that you may be in the right, but the better option is to, step aside. Okay.
All right, let's move on to our next story. For better or worse, history repeats itself, and we're going to talk about the new president, not so new, Trump of the United States of America. So Trump takes office next week. And I tell you what, I'm not a big fan of Trump, but I'm excited because I am less of a fan of the current administration by 1,000,000%. I am a business owner. I'm an entrepreneur. I run a ministry. And everything I do as a citizen here in the U.S. is trying to be thwarted by the current administration, whether it be my Christian ministry, whether it be my business, or any future prowess I have for another business. I can't do it. And it's even harder to do here in Maryland. Thank God I still have residency in Florida where I can get away with some stuff. So even though I complained about Trump when he was in office, and I know that we're going to be repeating history a little bit here, I look forward to President Trump taking office next week. I'm not the only one. I'm seeing signs around the world of other leaders of countries saying it's not going to be such a bad thing because what we have now is such a bad thing, including, George, Africa. There's nations in Africa saying it's not going to be such a bad thing because we have been treated as servants and slaves of the administration of Biden-Harris for 4 years, and we're sick and tired of having to beg for any handouts by submitting ourselves to transgender ideology, to surrendering ourselves to the gay culture, to having to allow for gay weddings and all else that is wokeism out of the U.S. It's time for a change, George. That change they think is Trump.
There's optimism in many African Anglican churches, and some pessimism in some Episcopal churches. The optimism in Africa comes from that the Biden administration, as well as the prior Obama administration, made explicit that if you want money, you have to follow our rules. So that in Ghana, you have to have same-sex marriage. You have to allow transgenderism. You have to permit abortion on demand. And if you don't, well, that hospital is not going to get built, or this USAID project is not going to happen. And this has caused, in Uganda, the church basically said, well, take your money and stuff it up where the sun don't shine. Not only to the Trinity Wall Streets, but also to the U.S. government, because Uganda does not want to be dictated to on what they believe to be moral and right by the American administration. And this is true of the British government, both under the Conservatives and the Labour Party. They have followed a liberal worldview, as has the EU. And the new Trump administration coming in has been saying, we're going to take a hands-off approach. You do what you're going to do. We're not going to tell you to do this. We're not going to tell you not to do that. If you want to have abortion, fine. If you don't want to, fine. It's up to you. You decide. We are not. The Trump administration is breaking completely with the old Republican way under George W. Bush, where we can make little Americans out of Iraqis and Afghanis, and have them somehow magically turn into little versions of Vermont, New Hampshire with town hall meetings and everything's peachy keen. And the Obama worldview and the Biden worldview, the neoconservative worldview of that America has a duty to basically govern the world through cutouts and intermediaries and with our monies to make, in other words, to interfere everywhere.
Except Afghanistan.
Yeah. Trump's point of view, which he has made public and which is being circulated through in African newspapers, and we will set up trade deals. Say, just do a trade deal with you under political purposes to manipulate your country. But, we're going to set up a trade deal. If you have a raw material that America needs, we'll set up a deal to make sure that America gets it rather than the Chinese. Well, so there's a sense of relief of that the African countries, and I'm just picking on Africa, but you probably say this about most of the world, are not being treated as our little brown brothers who need to be guided by our white, wise hands.
Well, this has been an internal discussion within America since World War I. How much do we try to affect what's going on and solve other countries' problems, especially in a time of war? And we find ourselves at that same question again because we're spending boatloads of money that we don't have as a country. And we'll give money to Ukraine, we'll give money to all these other countries in different amounts, including we give money to China, an enemy of the U.S. to somehow get some of our international support. So I don't know. This is way above my pay grade. I'm for less interference, more. I'm not in the sense of George W. or his father before him, but we'll have to see how this plays out, and we will see if history repeats itself. I know history of the journalism towards Trump will repeat itself. I know that he'll get real bad articles written about him, and he'll be the mean tweeter, even though he doesn't tweet as much anymore, but we shall see. Okay, George, we have a story that affects you. We got 5 minutes to go, and we're going to try and consolidate this as much as possible, but there has been a former Episcopal rector, current ACNA rector, arrested under child porn charges in Florida. And he is the former vicar of your church, Shepherd of the Hills in Lucanto, Florida. You're sitting in the office of Frank Go.
I just lost the connection.
Yeah, you're still talking. You keep talking. You're there.
Okay.
Yeah. That broke up again.
Looking scroll news, I see from Callsen County, which is in North Florida, that a Goff, rector of the A. Shalimar, has been arrested on 39 counts of possession of child pornography. Reading the story a little more deeply, I find that these images that were discovered after a warrant was executed in his home and in the church on portable drives were the most foul, obscene sorts of, 5-year-olds being sexually abused and whatnot. Frank Goff was the rector of the parish that I serve right now. I'm sorry, the vicar, 20 years ago. In fact, this was his office. And my initial thought was, well, nobody's going to know because he's now in a different denomination in a different part of the state. But that thought passed out after about a second, and I alerted the parish, alerted the bishop. And on all three, and I ditched my Baptism of Jesus sermon to talk about this and the issue of abuse and pornography. Had a parish meeting, and I laid out the facts of the case. And then I said, anyone who was here 20 years ago who was affected or knows of anybody who may have been harmed by Frank, let me know. The church has a duty to help. And that's just not go there. But I mean, if somebody needs counseling, we have to pay for counseling. That's just the way we do things here. I laid out in detail our current safeguarding protocols, two adults in every child's class, no one-on-one privately with children. Oh, the whole thing that everybody knows who does the safeguarding programs. Meanwhile, my wife and the other Sunday school teachers were teaching what I call the stranger danger class to all the children, how to respond to this. And, well, Frank left the parish. After the Gene Robinson affair in about 2004 or 5, Frank wanted to withdraw from the Episcopal Church over the Gene Robinson affair, and he wanted to take the parish with him. And Bishop Howe said, you can go, but the building stays. And Frank took about half the people and started another parish, an Anglican parish in the county that had 2 iterations, and both of them failed. And Frank moved on. By about 2010, my immediate predecessor, a man named Jim Adams, who had been Bishop of Western Kansas, was brought in and basically restored this from mission to parish status. And I came in 2014 and been here ever since. But what gets me is that I knew Frank. In fact, I had two
we both
points.
do. We both know. To be open here, he was a friend of Anglican TV.
I had 2 points of contact. My first parish was St. Elizabeth and Sebastian, And Frank had been the youth minister there before I came and was sent to seminary. He went to Swanee, sponsored by the parish. He was in seminary when I was at St. Elizabeth's. And upon graduation, he was made deacon in charge, then priest in charge of this brand new church in Lecanto. So I had 2 points of contact. And I talked to Frank, we were acquaintances at clergy conference meetings. And I had no clue. I was totally, absolutely, completely gobsmacked about the news that Frank had been arrested. I don't know if the charges are true. I do know it's true that he has been charged with extraordinary things. He's in his mid-60s. And if he's convicted, Frank's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. He's never going to get out. This is Florida. There are no 2-year sentences for these things. He'll get 39 life sentences, and if the judge doesn't like him, that'll be after each other. So he'll have to spend 39 times 35 years or whatever it is. But I think the point here is that most of my sermon after I laid out the facts was I talked about about the problems of pornography. It's not a victimless crime. Many of the people that you see in pornography are trafficked against their wills. And pornography is an addiction. During COVID, we had children at home doing their schoolwork on computers, and then there were little boys, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, 12, who after the schoolwork's done, and if mom isn't looking, click over and look at pornography. Now, when you and I were kids, pornography meant getting an 18-year-old to buy a Playboy magazine. That's not the pornography we're talking about that you can see on the internet. I don't really know that much about it, but what little I do know, that what I've seen, what I've been shown is so vile and so horrible. And what is so distressing is that these little boys assume that this is what little girls want, that this is what a normal, loving sexual relationship is, what they're seeing in these horrible, horrible films and pictures. Pornography is so destructive. It is such an evil, and I don't know how Frank got on board that train that led to this point.
Allegedly.
It indeed happened, allegedly.
Absolutely. Yeah. So,
I don't know him that well enough, and I just pray to God that there was no residual damage done here or his Acna parish up in Shalimar.
I would, like you, I don't have a knowledge base of pornography. I was exposed to it in the Playboy magazine form as a teenager, and I can't imagine what's out there now. All I know about porn right now is what I read on Daily Wire or Daily Mail or whatever, as far as the stories are saying. It's horrid. We talked recently about that fans only lady who slept with 100 or 1,000 men, I guess it was 100. And so, it's not something that I have a knowledge base on, although I remember the addictiveness back in my early teens of a Playboy magazine. And so I can only imagine how much worse it is now. And especially the younger and younger. And then the expectations of our society where we sexualize everything in public schools and how we talk to our children, and to make sure that they understand their gender roles and understand that they can choose who they want to be. This Western culture is so screwed up now, and it's not just the Franks, it's our children, and it's what they're going to be like when they grow up under the influences of this Western culture. So stepping back a little bit here, I would encourage the Episcopal Church, the ACNA, and other denominations to put out an anonymous poll of your clergy and ask who is struggling with this. I think you would be freaked out by the numbers of your clergy at any level who struggle with this, because this is so common now in this last 20 years. Once it's hit video form and internet form, there's no longer shame in pornography because it can be done in private. It's not coming from the drugstore in a magazine form. It's not something you have to share amongst friends to get a magazine and to see the female body. And so, in as such, I would encourage all denominations to do some research in this. And you're going to be shaken to the core by how many of your clergy have consistent and constant exposure on their own accord to pornography. But that also gives you the opportunity to do something about it. And I assure you, Frank's not the only one, allegedly. And we already know there was a bishop in the ACNA who was let go for this a couple years ago. So, it's out there.
One of the things I had to confess to the congregation was my bigotry on this issue. Mm-hmm. See, I was very smug. We Episcopalians, we Anglicans,
you're married.
This isn't our problem. We're married. That's a Catholic problem. Because they're celibate, it's all going to bubble out somehow, and the whole sexual abuse problem. Well, I should know better. But in the back of my head, it was always somebody else's problem because we weren't like that. And here, my predecessor, the man who worked in this office, was as guilty as
allegedly. Stop.
Allegedly. So it just is just discouraging.
It
really is.
It's discouraging because it's something that is not public. It's something that can fester in private now, in this day and age, of the laptop, of the computer, of the bigger house where you can. I don't have a big house. Harvey, there's nothing Jill and I don't know about. Nothing. Kevin, what did you do in the bathroom? Sorry. There's no secrets in an RV. But in this day and age of consumption and the larger houses and being able to separate yourself from what's happening in the family for a while, I can't imagine the hell people have to go through. And I think at a certain point, you as a consumer of pornography don't know that you're also a victim in this, that this is an addictive principle, that we understand addiction, but I don't think you understand addiction if you're addicted to pornography. Now, I have an addiction, George. My addiction is to munchies like pretzels. I'm looking over some potato chips. I got some sour cream Lay's potato chips sitting over the counter. And in front of me, if I had a little bowl, I would just, consume them, and it would give me comfort. It's an addiction. And
there is a good addiction. I would like our viewers to get their weekly dopamine hit.
Okay.
Watching Anglican
Unscripted. Huh? Yeah.
Get your dopamine hit by tuning in to a whole bunch of Anglican Unscripted addicts out there going.
All right. And what do? Click the like button. Be sure to share. And please go to the comment section. If you can enlighten us on pornography, that would be great. If you've ever struggled with pornography and you want to
no links, thank you. We don't need to.
We don't allow links in our comments, thank God. If you have struggled and overcome and you want to share your testimony, that would be great in the comment section on Anglican Unscripted. I'm Kevin Kallsen.
And I'm George Conger, and you've been watching episode 897 of Anglican Unscripted.